Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Tuesday Tips. My name is Michael Barber, and as always, I'm your host here on our Grow Schools channel. We're here every Tuesday, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, talking challenges facing school leaders. And I'm really happy to welcome back an alumni, a veteran of our Tuesday Tips conversations. That would be Jen Svendsen from Edgility Consulting. Jen, welcome back. It's so good to see your face again. How you doing?
Good, Michael. Thank you for having me.
Of course, it's our pleasure to have you again. We wanted to make this a follow-up conversation this week from last week's conversation. We did a webinar with Jen's team on equitable compensation strategies for teachers and how you can leverage compensation strategies for retention, for teacher retention. And we had just a fascinating discussion with Jen's team, and she brought some incredible expertise. So I'm going to ask her some follow-up questions from that conversation. But if you want to check out that webinar, you're more than welcome to. Just head over to growschools.com to our resource library, and you'll find it right on the top there for you to click on and take a look at. Jen, when you were talking last week about salary scales, you talked about how to ensure your steps and your lanes align with your talent strategy. How do school leaders do that in as few words as possible? Because I know you spent a good portion of time, but would love to hear, as you're building those steps and lanes and you're aligning it to talent strategy, what do school leaders have to think about?
Yep. You want to think about who you want to hire and retain in your organization. And then you want to think about, based on who you want to hire and retain, how do we incentivize them to stay in our organization? So if you want to hire early career teachers and train them up really quickly, you probably want to incentivize the early steps in your structure, right? And make sure that you're paying more competitively there, or most competitively there, to bring those folks into your organization. If you want to attract teachers that are more experienced and have higher education degrees, you're going to want to incentivize later steps in your structure and incentivize education. So have multiple lanes to recognize folks as they get those advanced degrees or gain additional educational credits. So it's really, again, thinking about who do we want to hire, and then once we know who we want to hire, making sure we're incentivizing the steps and columns that are going to allow us to achieve or attain our goal around that strategy.
Yeah, such good insights there. You really connected sort of talent philosophy to talent strategy, and then how does that connect to, your pay structure? And if you want more information on sort of the steps and scales that Jen showed as an example, you can hop over to that webinar, because her team and her did a great job of showing some examples of how steps and lanes can align to your talent strategy. Another thing you talked specifically about during our conversation was stipend policies within schools. And as we all know, those stipends are obviously additional compensation for teachers, going above and beyond and taking on extra responsibilities, whether that's coaching, mentoring, or advanced certifications. And you broke it down into a really, really easy to digest structure: the what, how, when, exclusions, and why. Can you talk about that stipend policy and how you broke that down?
Yep. Yeah, so I have been in a number of conversations with school leaders over the years where they talk about their kind of hidden stipend policy. Like, some things I've heard it mentioned or called something I keep in a drawer, right? And when I need it, I pull it out, right? And that's not what we want, right? We don't want it hidden behind doors. We don't want it hidden. We don't want it closeted away. We want to make sure that our policies are clear, that they describe the what, so that the policy talks about what activities are stipended. Typically, those are activities that are going to extend the normal workday, or activities that are at a higher job level. So there'll be things like overnight trips, theater, band, sports, department chair, teacher mentor. Those are generally stipended activities. You want to staff should understand the how. I recommend that all teachers and all staff be paid for their time. And so if a teacher works 2 extra hours a week for 12 weeks, that should be used to calculate their stipend. It should be 2 hours times 12 times their hourly rate, and that will tell you their stipend. You want to explain when it's used. So what activities count, right? Do you reward activities that teachers do once for an hour, or do you only stipend activities that teachers do either for a longer period of time or more consistently? You want to make sure that you are looking at exclusions. So typically you're going to exclude things that happen either during the normal workday or that are at their current job level. And I will say there's an exception there to the normal workday. If it takes over a teacher's prep time, teachers love their prep time. It is critical to them. And so if it takes over teacher prep time, it should be stipended because they're going to have to do that prep time after school. And then the last piece is the why, and I think this is the most important piece, is that I have talked to so many teachers in so many different focus groups and consistently heard that teachers want to be paid fairly and want to be recognized for the additional work that they do. And so it's critical to make sure when you're developing your stipend policy that you're paying teachers for their time and the effort they put in.
Yeah, such a good framework, that what, how, when exclusions and why, laying out a stipend policy that's clear and transparent so teachers know what they're going to be paid for. And there's, clear understanding across the organization of that stipend policy. You also talk specifically about wage discrepancies, around identifying and correcting those wage discrepancies, and specifically how that fosters transparency, fairness, equity, and trust. Can you talk about why identifying and correcting those wage transparencies fosters transparency, fairness, equity, and trust?
Sure. And sorry. Yep. So really, you want to make sure in terms of having equitable pay practices, you want to make sure that you're running a yearly equity audit or wage gap analysis. We talk a lot about market competitiveness, right? That's how you compare to the external labor market. So how competitive are you compared to your peers? What we didn't spend a lot of time talking about, and we don't always talk about, is internal equity. So how are different identities paid relative to each other? Internal equity is critical because having equitable pay practices and ensuring that different identities are paid fairly to each other builds, as Michael was saying, it builds transparency, fairness, equity, and trust. It boosts employee morale and engagement, right? When staff understand how they're paid, so when structures are clear and transparent and they understand how decisions are made, they feel better about the choices that are being made in the organization. That builds trust, that boosts employee morale and engagement, and once you've boosted employee morale and engagement, those folks are then going to go out and talk to their friends, they're going to talk to their students, they're going to talk to the community, and that's going to enhance the reputation of your organization across the community. As you enhance the reputation of your organization, not only within the schools, but also within your community, you're increasing your attraction to folks to your schools and to your organization. They know about who you are, they hear great things about you, and they want to come and work for you. And so it helps to increase attraction, as well as it helps to boost retention, because happy people stay. And then it also supports performance. When staff are happy, when teachers are happy, they want to do the best for their students, right? And they have the energy to do the best for their students because they feel cared for by their organization. And that boosts performance as well as productivity. The last piece here is really that this promotes diversity and inclusion. We know that historically, people of color have been discriminated against in the United States. When they go into schools where they continue to feel that discrimination, they're not going to stay, right? Mm-hmm. They're going to leave. And I've had enough, again, focus groups, talked to people of color, talked to teachers of color to understand their struggles and to know how critical it is for your staff and your teachers who are people of color to feel like they are cared for within your organization. And so by running those pay equity audits, again, you can share that out with your teachers. You can share it You can potentially share it out with your staff and say, look, we're paying fairly within the organization. And that just, again, goes to build that transparency, fairness, equity, and trust. It ensures that you're retaining staff, including your diverse staff, and it ensures that you can meet your mission and vision and impact for your students.
So much importance there for how you go about identifying and correcting wage discrepancies. And, one of the things I love about these Tuesday Tips conversations is how much I learn. This is one of the conversations as well as a webinar. I just have to say, I've learned so much during our time together between our webinar prepping for it and our conversations here on Tuesday Tips. So I just want to extend my thanks to you for all the incredible, dialogue and expertise you've brought to these conversations. With that, we keep these at 10 minutes and we're right over the 10-minute mark for today's Tuesday Tip. So we will say a big thank you to Jen and her team at Edgility for joining us today, for having a little conversation, a follow-up from a webinar we did with their team last week. If you want to check out that webinar, you just head over to growschools.com, click on the resource library. You'll find it there right on the top of the page. I'll also say this for those of you that are heading to Boston for NCSC 2.4, the National Charter Schools Conference, in just a few weeks. I think we're on the 2 to 2.5 week countdown before June 30th this week. So we'll let you know. Both of our teams will be there. So if you've got questions for Jen, feel free to look up where Edgility will be. But if you've got questions in the interim, they're available at edgilityconsulting.com. That's EDGILITY consulting.com. And you can reach out to Jen's team there. And with that, we'll say thanks for everyone for joining us for this episode of Tuesday Tips. And last but certainly not least, again, a big thank you to Jen for joining us today. Thanks, Jen. Take care.
Take care, everyone.